Hello YouTube streamers and welcome to the channel Chess with Enthusiast, and this time I have brought you an opening against the French defense. It's the Perseus Gambit. Well, I'm going to show you a part of Perseus Gambit which is also called as the Perseus Carlson Gambit with Carlson the spelling. And Perseus Gambit, I call it every time because this is really awesome gambit. I would like to show you the demonstration in two popular games of mine which went popular among friends with this gambit: e4, e6, d4, d5, and the Perseus Carlson gambit is knight f3. You must be wondering, the problem here is that you're just giving up a pawn, and where does the knight go? The point is, after d takes on e4, you play knight to e5 and you grab most of black's camp. The knight actually is, although looking vulnerable, is the very strong piece. Now I had a game, and this game I had against a bit lower rated opponent. My rating used to be then 1301 and his rating was 1256. And the game, he played f6, queen h5 check I gave, and you see if now here g6, then you know the further deal after these captures. Although you might see that black gets an active position, very much of a win for white. But in the game, after queen h5 check, king e7 was played. I just went queen f2 f7 check. Now the king has to move forward out of his camp. King d6, and then this knight c4 check. King went forward even further to d5. I played knight c6, knight to c3 check. You cannot capture the knight because it's protected by the bishop. Also, he was stupid enough to capture on d4 and bishop to e3 checkmate. As you can see, the king has just marched forward up the board till the d4 square and gotten checkmated. This is the beauty of the gambit. It just brings out the opponent king in the center. Other than that, it collapses everything else, and whatever else you try, it doesn't work. Well, other than I showed you the knight f6 move, here two more popular responses are knight to c6 and the response of c6 itself, this move. Now this is another game, and this game was against Fazil27. He was rated 1327, so of course above me. And the game, he did not play the c6 move, he played knight to f6. Knight to c3 I went for, he played a6 with the intention of pushing b5. So I immediately grabbed attention to the center and played bishop e2 first. As he pushed b5, I played bishop to f4. 4 pieces active against the black. However, you might notice that black has a bit better pawn structure and a strong central pawn on e4. However, the c and d files are semi-open and I could take advantage of them. So I immediately went for he went for bishop b7 and I castled immediately. Bishop to e7 was played, bishop to h5. Now asking for an exchange because then I could threaten some ideas on the king side as well. Because you see, the king side for black has even become vulnerable. But he castled instead. This time I went for bishop takes on f7 check. Rook captures, knight captures and king captures was played. And I brought his king to the f7 square. So queen d2 I played. Now immediately getting the rooks connected and trying to bring them to the king side for the attack. Because now the c and d file did not matter as much as the fgh file matter. Bishop to d6 was played, and here I went for rook a to d1, considering that if I capture those, he will lose the bishop pair. But the point being, I will have an attack on the king side. So king g8 was played. I went for bishop to e5, now centralizing completely. And knight b to d7 was played. Now putting an attack on the bishop, I played f4. And this was the moment in the game where knight g4 was tried. I played the even stronger move, queen e2. And of course you might suggest that it does nothing. What happens if knight captures on e5? The point is pawn captures on e5, and if bishop c5 check, king goes to h1. If e3 is played, then you simply play a3. Now the point being, the bishop is vulnerable. The queen to e7 if played, then queen d3, and after bishop protects the knight on c8, this position, although not seems very much, but still is very defensive and passive for black, and white is all in the attack. Queen e2 I played, and as I said, I've analyzed this with the engine. These two are the strongest moves, and white is already in advantage. He played knight g to f6, again bringing back the knight, and he thought that he could push the pawn and have some discoveries after the push of c5. Noticing that, I went for my own surprises. I played g4. This is completely against the principles of chess. I agree with you that you cannot open up king's side immediately. But the point being, all his pieces were stuck in the center, and even the side bishops, the bishop on b7 was not that active. Also, the queen stuck on the back rank has no place to go except the back rank, because it was shielded by the pawn and the knight. So queen e8 was tried, now trying to bring the queen into the play, and I went for the king f2 move. Now the point was to bring the king all the way from the king side to the queen side and then attack the king side. This was a very long plan, but it eventually worked out, because in the game bishop takes on e5 was played, and after I played pawn captures on e5, e3 check was given. The point being, I could have moved to g3, but I went for the pawn captures move, and now you cannot capture with the knight to move the knight anywhere, because after knight d5 check, which was played in the game, knight captures on d5 and bishop captures on d5 was played, and I went for king d2. So you can see the king, which was on the g1 square, suddenly jumped to f2, went to e3, now went to d2, and the final square for it is going to be c1. So c5 was played and king c1. And as you can see, I have succeeded in my plan to create an attack on the king side with my 4 majority pawns, my 2 open file rooks, and black is trying to counterplay. However, he has no square good enough for the knight to have an outpost, so his attack is slower. c4 was played in the game. h4 I went for a5 and f5. Now rook to a6, now trying to defend that pawn and making sure that although I have a majority, he must have the enough defense to push on the queen side. Rook to f4 I played, queen goes to b8, f takes on e6, bishop captures, and suddenly I went for rook to e4. Now protecting the pawn, that too twice because it was attacked twice. But this is a risky move, and queen c7. Now this is a risky move according to the computer, not for you human, because as humans we completely understand the position, and we of course have a very much advantage in this position. Rook to d6 was played, and he played rook c6. The point being, you cannot capture because you immediately create an attack busting open on the bishop on e6. Let me show you that. Rook captures on d6, e captures on d6, and now you have to play after queen captures on e6, rook takes on e6. You have to play most passively because you have already lost your precious advantage of having a bishop and a knight as a pair. So rook d6 was played, rook c6, queen d2, rook c5, now attacking the pawn, and I went for queen g5. Now this was the equal position extremely, because everything here was very much stuck. The queen side attack of black was stuck and the king side attack of white was stuck. But immediately my opponent Fazil made a blunder, and that blunder was h6. Consider the move queen to c8, then queen e7, knight protects, and you play the rook over here, then rook to d5, and after captures, you might see that white is up a rook. So this was not a possible move. Now going again to queen c8, now playing the whole variation again. After rook f4, if rook c7, then you see rook captures on f8, queen captures and rook captures, and immediately you might see that black has a very nice perpetual check idea, which you are unable to avoid every time you play this. So this would be a draw. However, we consider the move h6. I immediately went for queen e7 and my opponent resigned. There is no way to save the bishop, and there is no way to use any of the other pieces. You move the knight, you lose the queen or the bishop. You move the rook, you lose the tempo. And if you move the queen, you immediately lose defense. And capturing the bishop always comes with check. So this was a very lost position for my opponent. So that's the fun of this gambit. After this e4, e6, d4, d5, playing the move knight to f3, and after he captures, you just put a knight on e5, an extremely good outpost. So that is all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and like and share this channel with everyone. And therefore I end this video of Perseus Gambit.